I don't think Matt has heard of this one yet, but Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts.
Yeah, I
What's
don't
that?
think Matt has heard of that. I think that's something that passed by
Is
his
this a
radar.
rumor? Is this vaporware?
Yeah, I mean, when he was on vacation, it literally sailed right by him. Steamed right by him. Damn it, I could have made that so much better.
Yeah, not Age of Sail. That one's been out for a little while.
There's so many fucking naval games from Game Labs. I get lost sometimes. There's Age of Sail,
Yeah.
there's Dreadnoughts, and then there's another one, I think.
There's Naval Action, which is
Naval
what
Action,
you confused
yeah.
with Age of Sail. Then there's Age of Sail, and then there's Dreadnoughts. Naval Action is the one no one wants to talk about because that's the one that has a bit of a muddy past.
There's people talking about it, just not in a particularly positive way.
But yeah, a lot of positive things to say about Ultimate Admiral Dreadnought, which isn't officially out yet, right? It just entered like early alpha
1
access.
Yeah.
Basically, if you pre-order and you pay double the pre-order price, which is still a reasonable $50, I think it is, you can get access to the alpha build of Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts, which, I think, Tortuga, you're probably the best position to talk about this a little bit.
It's $50?
I don't. So yeah, I think it's what Matt said. It's $25 for early access. But if you want to play, no, sorry, it's $25 to pre-order, but $50 if you want early access, or maybe the pre-order will translate to beta testing. I don't know. But then I guess the game's supposed to be $50 when it's released, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm assuming they're just basically saying, hey, listen, we'll give you a discount if you give us money right away. And then they're saying, but if you pay what the full price will be, you can play this thing presumably 4, 5, 6 months early. I don't know. They're probably still a ways away from like a commercial release of the final product.
It's amazing because, I don't know if it's because I kind of think that it's with all these games being more or less similar, with the naval theme. I feel like they probably parlayed Naval Action into Ultimate Admiral Age of Sails, and they probably took a lot of the work they had done on both those previous to put them into Dreadnoughts. I don't know. I'm just speculating, but it would make sense for them to do that. So the funny thing is, when Alpha 1 came out, it's extremely polished.
Oh shit, really?
The ship combat. It's just the campaign, the actual, structure. The playground is there, but the context is completely missing right now.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and just so sort of an overview for those of you who may be unfamiliar with Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts, it is a game that allows you to design warships in sort of the late it basically covers all the way from the beginning of the pre-Dreadnought period, which is around the early 1890s, all the way through to 1920s, 1930s, so just before World War II. That's the era they're intending to cover with the game. It is, I guess the easiest description would almost be like Rule the Waves, but with graphics. That's usually what I see people say.
Yeah, there's two other games which people reference, which I actually keep talking and I'm going to look them up.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, it's basically like Rule the Waves with graphics to a certain degree. I wouldn't say they replace each other because Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts, I think, at least in terms of some of the things like the damage modeling, it's a little bit more bare bones than something like Rule the Waves. But it essentially allows you to build navies, design ships, and when the campaign's ready, it'll have something very similar to Rule the Waves, where you're basically the head of a navy of a great power in the period that we discussed. And you're charged with building and designing your fleet, progressing through technological advancements, and when wars come up, fighting wars. And we don't know much beyond that because the campaign's not in the game yet. So, it's hard to say exactly what that will look like. But the basic concept is the same as Rule the Waves, where you're the head of a navy, you're in charge of designing ships, and then you have to fight those ships when wars do occur. What's in the game right now is, I think it's 21 different scenarios.
Oh, wow.
In what they call the Naval Academy, which kind of doubles between standalone challenge missions and a little bit of a tutorial. So it basically walks you through the mechanics of building and designing ships, and then there's a whole bunch of different scenarios that you can see, why different types of designs or different types of technologies are sound or will help you out in different scenarios. So I think it's a pretty interesting game so far. I'm really excited about it, to be frank. And I think, as Tortuga said, for an alpha state for the game, it is incredibly well polished. And the thing that I think is the most impressive for me is the ship designer. It's almost like a more user-friendly Kerbal Space Program Manager in a kind of a way, where like you've got this 3D image of a hull, basically, and then you just drag and drop like through this really easy point-and-click mechanic. Like, do I want a turret here? Do I want a turret there? Where do I want to put the towers? Where do I want to put the funnels for the ship? If you could make a better ship designer GUI and user interface, I might call you a liar, because it is brilliantly done. I do have some reservations with some of the combat mechanics. I do feel like, especially with the damage model, it can become a little bit like shooting a burnt-out Hulk. And ships, I think sometimes some ships are too difficult to sink. I believe the way it works right now is there's all these different compartments in a ship, and when you hit the compartment, you can destroy it and you can damage it, or you can start fires, or you can start flooding. But once a compartment is damaged, I'm pretty sure you can't damage it again, which means like until in some scenarios it feels like there's like 1 or 2 compartments left in the ship, and you're just pounding it mercilessly, and it still won't sink. I also do think that they could probably do a little bit better job of managing return fire. Fire does get less accurate from ships as they're damaged, but it's kind of laughable to see a ship that has every compartment destroyed except for 1 or 2, and it's still returning fire with its main guns. Yes, there are historical examples that people will cite like that with like the Bismarck, but not every ship was the Bismarck, and right now it kind of feels a little bit like it. But again, it's in early alpha stage, so my hope is that as this game moves forward through development, they tweak and they polish those things and they refine those things, and that by the time the game is fully ready to launch, it irons out those, because for a game to be this early in development and for my critiques to be that pointed is pretty damn impressive.
So I'm kind of curious. So World War One combat has been like, like World War One to World War Two combat. If you fire a shell, you'd be lucky if you hit in the same realm of the actual other ship. How is, when you fire another ship, how accurate is it? Is it like kind of like, shoot and kind of, cross your fingers?
I mean, there's differing levels of technology. So your hit rates in the early 1890s are going to be dramatically different than the 1930s. By the late design ships, and I think some of the technology in the game probably progresses beyond the 30s and into the 40s, because they do have radar fire control by the late battleship designs.
Yeah, it goes to the 40s.
So if you're looking at like a radar, if you have a ship that has radar that you're shooting at an enemy ship, it's going to hit pretty well. Maybe not 100% of the time, but if you fire a salvo of 9 rounds, you're probably striking home with at least 1. So it seems about right. I mean, maybe the ships are a little bit more accurate than they should be. I don't know, but it's a game, and it feels appropriate. And there are some scenarios that kind of demonstrate the importance of the technology, where you're going up with like just a ship that can't see as far, can't hit as far, and you're going up against ships that can hit you further. So I think it does a good job of having the technology progress through the period of time. Frankly, I probably don't want a game that gives me a Jutland like 2 or 3 hit percentage chance on any shell shot for a battleship, because even if it's historically accurate, it may not be super playable.
Yeah, the 2 games that this is like, for people who are aware of these are pretty, I think, pretty niche titles by themselves, so it's not going to be everyone who knows this, but it's been compared to Pacific Storm Allies, or like, I guess there's a Pacific Storm type game series, and one of them is called Pacific Storm Allies. And the other one is an old PlayStation 2 classic called Naval Ops. Naval Ops actually did have this build your ship, where you would actually take the engine and like move it in your hull, and then you'd put like the boilers, and like it actually had you doing all that underneath the hull, which you don't do any of that in Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts. You just put a funnel, and then you're assuming that all the engine stuff is done under the hood for you. And it can get a little weird right now, because they have the balance system, which is pretty cool, like forward or aft, like how much of your displacement is, are you forward heavy or bow heavy? Are you, stern heavy? Unfortunately, it gets to the point where it's a little ridiculous. In order to counterbalance maybe a few turrets you have in the front, or it seems to be that there are a lot of them are bow heavy anyway. You end up putting your rear turret like, a few feet from the edge of your your stern, right? Which there'd be no way you'd put a turret there in real life. logistically you could not put the mechanisms you need to have a turret functioning right above the steering and all the rudders, the propellers. So
I'm going through the campaign here on the website here, and they have on the bottom here that you're basically the head, the chief admiral for your nation. You're kind of controlling the navy, and then there are alliances, and there's a whole bunch of shit that's going on. So the question I got for you guys with this campaign, is it like Pacific Theater of Operation PTO, like where you got like the map and you're kind of just directing the ships? Like, how does that work? Like, I can't. Am I imagining it right?
it's exactly like Rule the Waves. It's exactly like Rule the Waves. I'm pretty sure. I know that Rule the Waves was an inspiration of the developers because they've mentioned that to me. But they didn't say specifically the campaign map is supposed to be a clone of Rule the Waves. It more or less is. You're moving different ships between different sea zones. You have a foreign tonnage requirement. For those of you who are wondering, in the very first build, Alpha 1, version 60, which we've already moved past and you can't move back to, the developers left a back door to get into the campaign as it currently was built. And unfortunately, without anybody knowing it was intelligently on their part, they closed this loophole because somebody figured out the back door. You just held down Alt and you can click on it. And you can still do that in the game right now. It just, the world won't create anymore. It fails. So you could actually see the campaign. I was able to see it. It's basically just like Rule the Waves.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting because, again, they closed down the access to the campaign. So what the final product of the campaign looks like, there's still some questions around it. But yeah, I mean, everything I've seen suggests it's going to be very similar to Rule the Waves. Hopefully with some key enhancements. Obviously I don't think, I think one of my main frustrations with the Rule of Waves is just some of the randomness for the actual battles, where it's like, oh, I don't control what fleets are operating with what, and I just end up in a fight, and it's kind of like, this seems weird, or you just end up with a whole bunch of small cruiser action, and it's like, well, I don't quite understand that either. I should be able to kind of control where my squadrons are based, what those ships are made of, those kind of things. So we'll see. Obviously, it's still very early days. Just to stress, it is in alpha access. It's not even in beta yet. So they even have a disclaimer basically that says, like, literally anything we want to change before launch, we can still do that because we're at that stage of development.
Yeah, it's not even available on Steam from what I see. Like, I was going through Steam, it says add to wish list or something. But if you go through the website, it says buy $49.99. So looks like you have to go through the website, right?
Yeah, you have to buy through them direct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. For now.
When in the past, I think with Ultimate General Civil War, when it got to the beta phase, it was basically opened up in early access on Steam. But during the alpha phase, you have to buy it directly through them.
Well, I mean, the thing about this is like they're making this game. They're also making, I guess, the other one, which is the Age of Sail one, which I, got a chance to play, which was really good. And then I think they have like one or two other games. I think This Is My Land is another game there in development. So are they basically like a paradox where they got numerous studios developing these games? Because I doubt it's like 5 guys making 3 or 4 games at the same time.
They're vastly smaller than Paradox is 400 employees. They're vastly smaller than Paradox. I don't know how many employees they have. I don't know how many development teams they have either. I'm not super clear on that. I think one of the weird things that it's hard for me to understand sometimes with their structure is the original Ultimate General Gettysburg, which was their first game, and then also Ultimate General Civil War. They had the creator of the Darth mods, the very popular Total War games, was really kind of the main lead guy on both of those games. But they developed Naval Action as well, which was kind of, I believe, my understanding was a completely separate development team, not related at all to that individual. As I understand it, Ultimate Admiral Age of Sail, which is also in development, is they're reusing a bunch of assets from Naval Action, like the actual ship models are basically the same. They're just zoomed out to a different scale. Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts doesn't have that. I know that the Darth mod creator is involved in Dreadnoughts. I don't know if he's involved in Age of Sail. And then to your point, they also have the This Land Is My Land, I think it was, which is kind of a Native American game that they're working on, which I'm almost certain is a completely different development team. But they've also said that Age of Sail and Dreadnoughts are different development teams as well. So I don't know if that just means like the coders are different, but like the designers are the same, because there seems to be a lot of similarity between Age of Sail and Dreadnought, but I don't really know.
Yeah, at least from what I see the gameplay, it looks like, Age of Sail just with modern ships, at least for the tactical element. From the screenshots that I'm looking at, I did not play Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts, but from what I'm seeing in terms of the video and the screenshots, it feels like it's Age of Sail just modified for modern warfare.
Well, there's no modern warfare in Age of Sail. It's Napoleonic combat.
No, I mean like in terms of the Dreadnoughts one. I guess semi-modern, right? Because it was about a century ago.
Yeah, I'll be honest, looking at the two, I do think the games play pretty differently, and to me, the actual like, oceans and everything look a little bit different. I'm not sure how much is reused and how much isn't, but I don't know. They seem somewhat different, but there are also a lot of similarities, so it's really hard to tell at this point. I mean, they're a relatively small studio that has had a lot of success with both Ultimate General Gettysburg and then more so Ultimate General Civil War. Naval action, I don't know financially if it was a success. It certainly from a PR perspective was probably a failure for the studio anyway. But they've got 3 games under their belt, and obviously they're working on 3 new ones. They certainly have had enough success to have 3 games in development simultaneously, but they're a private studio, so they don't really talk a lot about themselves as a studio. I think if you follow their Twitter account, you'll realize that they have a lot of confidence in themselves. They're very willing to call out practices that they disagree with from like a wargaming perspective on their social media.
It's an example of that. I don't actually know what you're talking about.
I don't know off the top of my head, but I know I've seen things where they've tweeted things and it's kind of like, oh wow, that's kind of assertive a little bit, yeah.
If you guys had to like break this down like right now, because it's $50, right? So if the listeners listening to this and they're like, you know what, I've been waiting for this game, but it's $50. Should I get this early alpha? Is it worth that $50 price tag for that early alpha?
I don't know. I mean, it's such a subjective thing. I don't want to cop out, but I think the easiest thing for people to do, I'm not going to try to just pitch myself here, but anybody, you can go to watch Historical Gamers content, my content, Benjamin Magnus, anybody. Just go look at the videos yourself. And what it is what we've already said. It's basically like the combat is a little bit more quote-unquote arcadey. I don't want to use that word too much because it's still pretty in-depth, but a little more arcadey than Ruled Waves, but you're getting 3D action. So if that's something that interests you and you have $50 to spend, then you can be playing it tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, I think $50 is worth something different to every single person, right? But what I would say is that if you enjoy a game like Rule the Waves, this is a game that I don't think you'll be disappointed in what we've seen so far. But, it's hard to say at this stage. It's in alpha, right? So watch some videos like Tortuga said. Make up your own mind. And if it's something you wanna get into it. If it's something you want to wait until it's a little bit more of a finished product, by all means, wait until it's a more finished product.
Okay, it's probably going to be a 2020 release, right?
I would guess, but they haven't really. They're always, one thing that Game Labs does is they're always very kind of quiet about their stuff. Like, they announced Dreadnought a while ago, but it just kind of randomly one day without any real preamble, they said, oh, yep, it's available. You can get access to it if you pre-order it. So, I don't know how much advance notice we'll get before it comes out. I mean, it is super well polished, so if they're further along in the campaign development than we're aware of, I could see it releasing this year, but I think given their previous track record and their history and, the length of time that they really make sure things like, Civil War was ready before they actually commercially launched it, we might see in a beta version before the year's up, but I don't think the final version would come till next year.
All right, well, there you go. So besides this game, I've seen this pop up numerous times on your channels, but you guys have been playing other games from what I've been noticing. So what other games have been populating your channel that have got you turning your head on?
What other games have been playing? I've been playing a lot of Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts, as we're talking about. Another game that I've been playing a little bit of is Radio Commander. I'm not super far into that. I haven't had a ton of time to play it, but it's an interesting game that basically puts you in the shoes of essentially what I think is a company commander back on a fire base in Vietnam, and the only way that you can issue orders is via your radio. So you get radio reports from your platoons that are out in the field, and then you have to make decisions on this sort of strategy map, this 2D map, to give them orders. So you can order them to move across the map. You can call in artillery support. You can call in air support, medevacs, all these different things. But you have to do it all via the radio, and you have to base it all based on what they're telling you. And you can move little chits around the map so you can kind of get an idea of where your men are. But if you don't listen to them properly and you put the chit in the wrong place, or you call in artillery support on coordinates that you're not really paying super close attention, either one, the artillery will just miss and your troops may get overrun, or two, you may shell your own troops. And so it's a pretty interesting little game. I'm not far enough into it to really have a final opinion on it, but it's definitely a different way of doing things. For the historical accuracies out there, I don't think the game really models one specific position, right? Like in real life, company commanders were in the field with their men. Battalion commanders weren't calling an artillery fire support from a remote base, but it kind of mixes like almost like a battalion level positioning of where you were with a company level responsibility, and then also taking on the role of like a forward observer who would actually be the one calling in the artillery and air support. So it kind of has a conglomeration of different pieces of what you're doing, but it's a really interesting game concept that really is focused on making you make tough decisions with really limited information and a limited sense of what's actually going on.
Yeah, I mean, I got a chance to play the game. I was kind of very impressed by this game. Now, I just kind of bear in mind to anybody listening, I am not a 25 Charlie, so I did not go to school for that. But it's very, I would say it's very reminiscent from like the people I know that do that job. Like it sounds like this game feels, very immersive. It feels like you're that guy at the TOC, which is the Tactical Operations Center. So it feels like you're that guy in the TOC and you're actually moving shit around a map. And nowadays everything is digital, right? So you actually have, officers and the NCOs that are at the headquarters or the forward operating bases that, everything is digital. You have units on the map and then probably GPS on them where they are and stuff like that. But like 10, 20 years ago, they had them all on like a map. So you're like, all right, Alpha Platoon is here, and Bravo Platoon is here. So, this is for the Vietnam War. So it kind of very immerses you into that role. And I did like that because like you were saying, if you fuck up, right? If you say, all right, Alpha Platoon's over here and you're drinking or whatever, and you move the piece in a different part of the map and you call in our artillery bombardment, on your guys, you're going to fuck them up. So, I do like that fact that you have to keep your P's and Q's together, so that was really good. I think it's on sale for like $15 right now. I do like that, when you're calling an artillery, like the ground's starting to shake a little bit, and howitzers, they, they rustle the ground a little bit. But, Tortuga, did you get a chance to play it?
No, I haven't touched a radio commander yet. I don't want to say it like that. I just haven't looked at it. I've been too busy with other things, so.
Too busy with your naval strategy games. Tisk, tisk, tisk. You got to get back on the land.
Speaking of, by the way, I found a tweet exchange from Game Labs where they're basically tweeting at some people that say too many. The real unspoken part is too many indie developers do not make something users want. Just like I'm not going to spell out the Twitter user handles. Said there's too many toy makers. There are great toy users. There are great toys users want to play, and there's the rest. Starting a band comparison is not always true. Some toys are art, some toys are not. If your games are pure art, then you should never expect to make money. And it goes on. But I mean, just sort of like, I think they make some great games. I just think it's kind of interesting following their Twitter because they're very opinionated on things. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. In some sense, it's kind of refreshing. But it's just, some stuff that you don't always expect to see out of like a developer Twitter account.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. I mean, they're very passionate about the game, so that's a big thing, at least for me.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't saying it in a bad way. I was saying they're very opinionated and confident in their own abilities, and I think, especially in the Ultimate General series, they've had a lot of success.
And they earned it. They earned their stripes because honestly, the Civil War game that they came out with, Ultimate General Civil War, that game had the best user interface for moving entire corps and armies. I was very impressed. To this day, I'm very like wow about that because I've never run into a game that, at least a Civil War game, that was able to manage an easy way to kind of move entire armies or corps without having me pause the game and spend 30 minutes moving that.
I think you can do it in Scourge of War, but it's different because the AI controls a lot of the movement if you're working at the core level.